Acumen Suite. Today is tips and tricks with Acumen Fuse. The next 2 days, we'll be talking about Acumen Risk and Acumen 360, respectively. But today we'll be focused on Fuse. Just a couple of notes regarding the GoToWebinar control panel. We have some instructions on the screen right now to minimize the window if you want to get it out of the way. And if you want to ask a question today, use the chat window on the screen. We'll be monitoring and even answering some of those questions during the presentation, but we are going to make time at the end as well for any questions that have been asked during the session or any questions that you type into the chat window at the conclusion of the session. If we don't get to the opportunity to answer all of the questions today, we'll certainly be following up with you, and we'll also let you know at the end of the session contact information and ways to find more information about the Acumen company and the Acumen products. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Acumen. I don't want to spend too much time with background because I know you're all eager to get to the tips and tricks section today. But for those who may not have as much experience with our company, the top of the screen says it best: Acumen Proven Project Analytics. Our core focus is project management software. One of the key words is insight into project challenges and improving planning, accuracy, and reliability. We strongly believe in a sound plan. We don't believe in engaging in program execution for large or small projects without a sound plan. Our software, as you'll see some of the features today, helps you evaluate the quality of your plan, look for trends in your plan, and helps you prioritize improvements that may be needed as you go through execution on your project. Tomorrow, we'll be talking about forecast accuracy and considering risk in the equation. You can see on the screen some of the recent recognition we've had: Planning Innovation of the Year 2012 and one of the fastest growing companies. Our overall legacy has 25 years, actually even more, of thought leadership, and we're trusted by a number of Fortune 500 clients. And you can see some of those client names on the right-hand side of the screen. A little bit about the products. There's 3 products in total, one of which we'll be talking about today. But here's the roadmap as to how a user would engage with the different products. And we've overlaid this on our S1 to S5 schedule maturity framework. And you can see the S1 to S5 down the left-hand side of the screen, starting with schedule basis, where, as always, you would use your planning software, whatever it may be. We're compatible with all of the major scheduling software tools. You can see Primavera, MS Project, OpenPlan, Asta Excel, and even Phoenix Project Manager. You see some cost tools there, some risk tools that we interface with as well. We're not a replacement for those tools for developing the schedule. Rather, we complement those tools nicely. With S2, where we begin to critique the schedule, that's where Acumen Fuse comes in with its project diagnostics, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Tomorrow, we're focused on S3, risk-adjusted schedules, and managing both probabilistic and deterministic risk. S4 on Thursday, how to develop an optimized schedule so that you can get to S5 and have a validated, team-approved schedule that everyone can buy into. Okay, today we're focused on Fuse. I will review some of the basic functionality, some of my favorite functionality as we get into the software, but today's session is mostly focused on some of the features that are very beneficial in Fuse and help you get the most out of Fuse, but they may, if you're a user of Fuse, they may not be some areas that you've investigated yet or tried out. So my goal today is to help you become more familiar with some of those areas in the tools so you can try them out on some of your own projects. You're going to see me try them on some of mine, and you know, help you get more value out of your investment in the software. For those less familiar with Fuse, I'll do a brief review here. You get tremendous insight into what's going on in your project. And when I say what's going on, I mean literally anything. We have nearly 300 metrics and ways to measure performance and compliance of your project right out of the box. Plus, we have a metric editor where you can build your own. Well, what are these for? Why are you using these metrics? You want to improve the quality of your project, understand where it's been, where it's going, and whether or not you think you'll be able to bring the project to a successful conclusion. And all of our metrics help you determine that. The audience for Fuse is primarily schedulers and planners, also project controls resources, forensics analyzers as well. And we've even found in organizations that it's gone beyond these resources as well. Like I mentioned with the custom metrics, the system can really be tailored to virtually any audience that has a stake in your project. Some of the features here I've already mentioned, and we'll be talking about most of these today. The industry standard metrics, as I mentioned, the forensic analysis, which is one of our deeper topics today, dashboards and reporting. And today I'll be talking about both reporting inside and outside of the tool, and industry benchmarking as well, which is understanding the quality of your project relative to the rest of your industry. Okay, so the first in-depth topic today is trend analysis. Before I get quite into there, I'm just going to go. I'm going to go over into Fuse, and I might jump back and forth between the PowerPoint a little bit as well, just to keep everything paced and understandable. Here's the Fuse main screen. If you're a user of Fuse, you've seen this screen many times, and some of you may have noticed that I've already loaded some projects in here today. I did that for the sake of time. These projects that I'm using today are shipped with the Fuse product. So if you want to try anything that I'm doing today and you don't have a project or multiple snapshots of your own, these are in your Acumen Fuse sample files folder and free for your use to be able to do the same sorts of things that I'm doing today. In fact, if you do the same things that I'm doing today, you'll get the same results on the screen as I'm going to get. So what I've done is I've used the Primavera button to load in Primavera baseline and then a series of incremental snapshots through project execution. And that's an important concept to understand, because as I go into this trend analysis, we'll be looking at the trends from the baseline through 1 month, 6 months, 1 year, and finally the current schedule. Now, those are some arbitrary intervals. You're free for your projects to load monthly snapshots. In fact, that's probably the best way to do it, is to look at your project every month, maybe even twice a month, depending on your update cycle, and see the changes, revisions, and trends that have occurred during execution. Also, I've loaded a couple of MS project files as well. I think I'm going to use these files in forensics today because I've made some strategic changes between these two projects, which will show us in forensics exactly what changes that I've made. So let me go over to my favorite screen in Fuse, which is the diagnostics screen. And we're going to start kind of in classic or traditional mode here, and then we're going to move over into the trend analysis. I'm going to do it this way for 2 reasons. One, some of you don't have as much experience with the software as others, and 2, if you're not familiar with trend analysis, I'll review what we have on the screen now, and then I'll show you the difference when I go to the trend analysis feature. So here in Fuse, what I'm looking at is those different Primavera versions of my schedule, from the initial plan through the incremental updates through the current schedule. Now, right away, you'll notice that there's red, yellow, and green all around the screen, scattered about on these different metrics. Convention applies. Red means I've got a situation that's undesirable. Yellow means that I have a questionable situation, and green means that it looks like everything is intact and on track. Now, down the left-hand side, I have a series of what we call our schedule quality metrics. These are metrics handpicked by us at Acumen that we feel represent a concise view of the quality of a schedule. I have those same metrics across the top here. So the immediate question is, well, why do I have them twice? The reason I have them twice is on the left-hand side here, I'm looking at, if I'm looking at multiple projects, right now my main project is initial plan, but I can drill into any of these projects. If I'm looking at a portfolio, it'll add up all these numbers, and I'm looking at my compliance and performance across my portfolio. Here on the right-hand side, each metric result is listed singly by project. So I can see which projects have more missing logic than others. In fact, they all have 11 items of missing logic. Is my negative float getting better or worse? So before we had trend analysis, which I'll show you in a minute, we would have to look over here to the right and see if we could spot any trends between initial plan, 1 month update, 6 month update, 1 year update, and current schedule. With trend analysis, we get to take this whole screen, turn it on its side a little bit, and then we can exploit some of the charting functionalities to really see some trends that pop out on our project. So let me do that now. I'm going to click trend analysis. And the screen's changed quite a bit. So I'll walk you through exactly what's happened here. If you recall, we have initial plan, 1 month update, 6 month update, 1 year, and current schedule. Well, across the top now, initial plan, 1 month update, 6 month update, 1 year update, current schedule. So instead of listing them down the left-hand side, we've listed these snapshots across the top. Now down below, we can see the metric results for each of these items, much like we had in the ribbon view on the previous screen. So, okay, we turned it on its side. We're looking at the items from left to right in logical order. Now, if we go to our charting, now we can really spot our trends. One of the terms that I hear a lot, and it's a popular request from our customers, is they want to be able to look at float erosion on a project. They want to see how many activities they have on the schedule with negative float, and they want to see whether that's increasing or decreasing. If the items with negative float increases as the project is executed, you could end up in a no-win situation. So it's important to monitor and drive proper flow behavior on your activities as you execute. We're giving you a way to do that here, not just for float, but for any one of the 300 metrics in our tool. So for instance, I can add to this list. I can look at my use of constraints, which has stayed very steady across these snapshots. I can look at the number of critical activities that I have. And one thing that's interesting is my number of activities that are critical has gone down, but my number of activities that have negative float is going up. It means there's a concise number of items that are driving the delay on my project, while there's other activities that are on track. So this kind of information, without this trend analysis, would be very difficult to spot. You would have to look through reams of data to try to get to this information. What we're attempting to do here with the trend analysis is to allow you to very quickly pick the metric or item that you want to understand across the weeks, months, or years of project execution and see where those items are headed. It doesn't take too long to figure out in project execution that if something is trending up, it tends to keep trending up. If something's trending down, it tends to keep trending down unless external stimulus is applied. So if it's an undesirable metric and it's going up, basically it means you have to do something or it's going to keep continuing. Conversely, if you have a good metric and it's going up, you might want to capture what's going on and see if that same opportunity applies to other areas in the project or other projects in your portfolio. Okay, let's go back to our trend analysis. Let's go back to our trend analysis slide. First two items I talked about, we effectively end up with a side-by-side comparison of project snapshots instead of a vertical listing. And a very small subset of what you can do here is track progress over time, schedule quality over time, and more. You're only limited by the metrics that you've chosen to utilize. So I've got the hundreds that come out of the box here, so we can go to any one of these tabs. In fact, we can go to float in particular, and I'll just show you another example here. Let's go to trend analysis on float, and we'll pull up that chart view. That's kind of my favorite view here. We can look at negative float trends, but then we can also look at trends. Do we have an increasing or decreasing number of items that have 0 to 20 days of float? Do we have increasing number of high float activities that have more than 30 days? Well, no, those are coming down. And that's what I see quite often with project execution. Tasks start out with a high amount of float. As things happen, as circumstances happen during program execution, float tends to decrease, which is what we're seeing here on the high float activities. Now, I can overlay as many of these metrics that I want, but to keep things concise, just as easily as I've added them, I can click to remove metrics as well. Okay. Let's go to our next item, which we're calling variance analysis. We also call this our forensic analysis. We can identify variances or anything that's changed across a portfolio of projects. For instance, one of my favorites is calendar changes, and I'm going to show you what a calendar change looks like. We can see changes in any of our scenarios. And one thing that's really nice, and I'll talk a little bit about a good use for this, checking changes in any user-defined field, which can be very helpful with scope and release management. And I'll get to that in a moment. Let's first look at the functionality. For this one, let's remove my Primavera projects. We'll just get those out of the way. And let's look specifically at my MS project file, because I know I've made a change here. Let's see if I can, actually I've made more than one change, but let's see if I can spot some of the important changes that I've made. Moving to the forensic screen, it's another tab across the top here in Fuse. Down the left-hand side, it lists the project. And for this one, to keep things simple, I just had one snapshot, but it's a good chance for me to let you know I can do forensics not just as a comparison between any two projects, but I can actually trace the whole tail through a series of snapshots of a project. Some of you are seeing this for the first time, so I'm going to start with a real basic setup, one initial plan, and then one snapshot along the way. Across the top are all of the different things that I can check for as I'm comparing these two projects. And by the way, this little button up here, this More button, this is where I can compare the value in any user-defined or code field in my schedule, as well as these default fields across the top. So this is scalable and as extensible as you want it to be. Let's look first at modified calendars, because I've prepared this especially for this webinar. Is in the current schedule, there's a slightly different calendar. The base is the same. You can see this blue area, but I've added some shift time. I've added a Saturday shift of an hour. I've extended Wednesday, and I've extended Monday a little bit. This is one of the first areas that I look at, especially when I'm receiving a subcontract schedule month over month. And now I'm not suggesting that anyone might intentionally send me information that is going to put their schedule in a better light, but it's happened before. So what I normally do is, just as an initial check, I take the current update and I do a calendar comparison to the most recent schedule or to the baseline, usually both. An added shift in the calendar allows a project to extend its activity durations without impacting its end date. Contractors are under pressure to meet their end dates. Sometimes they might do things in the schedule that help them meet that end date. It's not a suspicion of fraud or anything like that. I just want to understand if they're working additional time or if additional time has been put into the schedule perhaps inadvertently. In other words, my durations can increase or my tasks can delay, and by adding shifts to my calendar, it might mitigate the impact on my finish date. it's a good thing to check for, and it's one of the many checks that we have here on top of the screen. Now, it's not the only thing that's important. In an environment where scope control is paramount, especially in the defense and government contracting industry, I can pull up the add and removed activities, which show me these two tasks were not in the initial plan, but they're in the current schedule. That might be completely normal, completely natural, but if I'm in a changed managed environment, it's something that I want to be aware of. I can look at modified relationships, where this even shows me that where not just that a relationship existed and now it doesn't, but it will also show me if there was lag, which has now changed to a different value, in this case from 2 days of lag to 5 days of lag. What I look for here and what I become concerned about here is when I see a decrease in finish-to-start relationships during execution, but an increase of finish-to-finish relationships during execution. In other words, tasks that were baselined or planned to occur in sequence start occurring in parallel if the relationship changes from finish-to-start to finish-to-finish. Now, that's part of optimizing and perhaps even accelerating a schedule. But if I see a preponderance of that, I become concerned whether or not there's resources available to conduct the amount of work in parallel that would need to occur with the finish-to-finish relationships. So again, it's not a right or wrong, it's not an immediate red flag, but it's a way for me to very quickly understand how relationships have changed in the project. Frankly, I don't know how I would do this without forensics. There's no easy way in the scheduling tools to take two different schedules and have it show you all the relationship changes between the two schedules. Modified resource assignments. I can see where resources have been added, removed, or changed. If they've been removed, I see this hashed bar under current schedule 1. If it's changed, I see my initial plan hours here, and then I see my hours in my current schedule here as well. In fact, I can even take this and I can group by resource so that I can see changes specific to the design team. I have management, PMO, and contractor. So I've been showing you just the list view, but on large projects, to make the list more consumable, you might want to group it. And I did that quickly. It's very intuitive. All I did was I took the field that I wanted to group by, and I just dragged it up here into the grouping area. This time I did WBS, and it's grouped all my changes by WBS. Okay, so we have these quick start buttons over here. Over on the right, this is my field access, and this is that configurable area. Here I've picked remaining duration changes. This is a baseline compared to a current view, so I'd expect that my remaining durations are decreasing, I hope. Maybe the occasional one will increase, and I think I've got a few of those here in blue. But in general, this is another one of those comfort things. I like to go to this screen and see that those remaining durations are generally decreasing. And I can go to any one of my fields. I can look at float. I can see if activities are going on or off the critical path. This is kind of interesting here. I've got a series of activities on my current schedule that are now critical that weren't critical during the baseline. Maybe they had some float, maybe just a small bit. Maybe a single activity has slipped, which has driven these out to be critical. In fact, in a few minutes, I'll be showing you the logic trace function so we can figure out exactly what happened in a situation like this. Now let's talk about the More button here. You can take any one of your fields, and I'll show you some of the user-defined fields that I have here in this project. Got a series of user-defined fields, slightly different ones in these two projects, and I can select any field to compare in forensics. And this is where I mentioned earlier getting into scope control and release management. You might have a text field in your schedule or a number field that indicates a release number. say numbers 1 through 5. And one of the engineers working on the schedule may have taken some activities from release 3 and changed their indicator in the schedule to show that they'll be in release 5. Now, management may or may not be aware of this change, and there might be some documentation that needs to be completed to move these features from release 3 to release 5. Or someone's gone rogue and made this change in the schedule without completing the proper documentation and scope discussions to see if that's a legitimate change, or it's simply a typographical error. Well, you want to spot those so that your schedule has the right activities and features in the right release. So what you can do is you can take that user-defined field, add that to your forensics list, and then say it's called, I don't know, feature. You can then go to forensics once you've added that, and your field called feature will appear up here in the list. So now you're running forensics on your own fields, ones that you've designed that have meaning to your process that we at Acumen may not even know about, but we don't need to because we've given you the ability to add those to your own forensic analysis screen. Okay, so I think I hit these items calendars. We can use one scenario or any number of scenarios, and as I mentioned, that feature field or any other user-defined field you can look for your changes on. Okay, let's talk about logic sensitivity from the theory standpoint, and then we'll go into the tool as well, and I'll show you how that works. If you have a robust schedule, the delay or slip in any activity should affect the project end date. If it doesn't, it means you have missing logic or you have an activity that's not needed in your schedule. Long story short, everything in the project needs to get done before the project can be considered finished. So this logic sensitivity, or as we call it, the nudge, that's going to help us determine any task and whether or not it's ultimately linked through the finish of the project. Now, we can go a step further than that, though, and we can look for logic sensitivity between any two activities in the schedule, which helps answer the question, for me as a task owner, based on the way the schedule has been designed, will this other team's activities impact mine? And if so, by how much? So we've added capability in our 4.1 release to answer that question. So let me go over to the system and show you what I mean. It's available on our Logic tab, and it's called Logic Sensitivity. There's a few different ways to use it. Let's move our projects out of the way. We have 3 different things that we can control. We can control the activity that we want to nudge, and by default, that nudge duration is going to be 600 days. So we're effectively going to be running a simulation, and in the simulation, we're deciding that a task is going to be 600 days late, and we're going to see whether or not that impacts our schedule. By default, we come up with the project finish, but as I mentioned, you can pick any activity in your project to see if activity A with 600 days is going to nudge activity B. So let's pick an item here. I think I've got one that I know impacts my finish date. Let's find out, though. We can even select a random activity, and we can even have it find the last activity on its own. So let's click Analyze, and sure enough, by virtue of the fact that I've got this diagonal line here, the target activity, project finish, incurred a delay of 808 calendar days due to the slip of 600 working days added to the nudge activity. It took 18 days of nudge to start having an impact on the project finish activity. That's kind of a measure of free float that we have here, but remember, we can look at that value between any 2 activities in the schedule, not just the finish date of the schedule. So let's pick a random activity, and let's see if we can, okay, this one has 12 days of nudge before it starts causing delay. Let's see if we ultimately find one that's disconnected. No, my logic might be a little better than I expected. Oh, here's one. It came out. It said there's no impact on the target activity. By adding 600 days to the nudge activity foundation, nothing happened. Well, that's not very good. The foundation person might like that, but because they can basically slip infinitely. But it means there's missing logic in the project, and there's not the relationship between foundation and project finish that we'd expect to have. Now, more often, in a properly linked schedule, I'd expect to have this result if I handpicked an activity from a different functional area that didn't relate to foundation. Then I might expect to see a blank chart out here where there's no impact. But if I've selected project finish, I should certainly see impact from my nudge. I should see a diagonal line here showing me the impact, and I don't. What does that mean? It means I need to go back to the diagnostics screen, run my schedule quality checks. Let me get out of my charting mode here. And you can see in this project there is missing logic. In fact, there's 11 items that are missing a predecessor or successor. So we really don't know what our critical path is for this project, and we can't be assured that every activity can be nudged and have impact on the finish date. So hopefully I would have found that issue here, solved these missing logic issues before I did my nudge. But if I went ahead and did my logic sensitivity nudge and I don't have the missing logic tied out, I should expect to see some of these items where foundation can slip indefinitely and technically not affect the finish of my project. Now you and I know that it should. Okay, let's talk about logic trace. And when it comes to tips and tricks, this is one of the best kept secrets in the application. In fact, on our website, on our blog, we recently wrote an article about this a couple of months ago because we didn't hear many users talking about this feature. So we decided to give it a little bit more attention because it is very useful, both during the baseline establishment of a project to see where different activities are connected, but then also during project execution to see how different activities interact with one another. Combined with the nudge capability that I just showed you, it's extremely helpful for knowing and learning causal relationships between different activities in your schedule. It's going to help you verify that tasks are linked in the best way. And what's nice on these last two bullets, I have a switch, which I'll show you in a moment, which allows me to choose whether or not I'm going to look at driving paths only, or if I'm going to see what the secondary paths are between activities. So let's go over to that. One of the great things about the logic trace is it's accessed right on the same diagnostic screen that you're already using to understand your schedule quality. So what I've done is, for my results set, which is in the lower right-hand corner here, instead, what I can normally do is I can click on missing logic. There's 8 missing logic items in 2010, so here's the list of 8 items. Now for a logic trace, I might want to see everything. So what I can do is I can click on the project name towards the upper left-hand corner, and now I can see all 65 activities, numbered 1 through 65, that I have in my schedule. Okay, now I'll get to the point. I have some very small buttons here, but very powerful buttons, right above this intersection analyzer. I'll confess, when I started using the tool a couple years ago, I didn't even know that these were there. Let's look at them one by one. Trace forward, trace backward, trace forward and backward. So let's take bid B review, because I happen to be clicked on it, and let's trace forward. Guess what? It traces forward to commercial review, but then it doesn't trace any further forward than that. I should ultimately get to that project finish milestone. So I know I've got an issue here, and there's 3 ways that I could have found this issue. I could have done what I just did, tracing forward. This is definitely the result of missing logic. and commercial review, I guarantee, is a missing logic item. Or if I had done a nudge on bid B review, I would have found that the logic wasn't robust enough to impact my finish date. Let's trace backward. It traces backward up to requirements definition. Oh, I promised you one other thing is I have the trace option here. Right now I'm not solely on driving logic, but I can select that and it'll only show me the activities that have a direct one-day to one-day slip relationship. It won't show me the activities that are the paths that have some free float or some slack on them. So here I trace backward, and now I can trace see, now I can trace forward and backwards at the same time. Let's do it from this activity. Here we go. I trace forward to commercial review, and then I trace backward through competitive analysis and requirements definition. And we've got another feature here as well. So before I go away from this, basically what you can do is you can pick any task. You can see where it's been from a logic path standpoint, and then where it's headed. And that trace forward, I'm always looking to see if the project finish milestone, if I can trace forward from the task to the project finish milestone. In this case, that I can't. That's concerning. It means I'm missing some logic. I've got another capability here which allows me to trace the path between any two activities in my schedule. Let me do one thing here. Let me get all my activities back, all 65 of them. Let's see. Oh, I'm still traced here. Let me go to, let me uncheck that. Okay. Now, what we're able to do is we can pick a starting activity and we can pick a finish activity in our project, and we can look at the path between those two activities. Now, I've got some missing logic in this schedule, so I may or may not have a path between the two activities that I select. So we'll see what happens here. And I do not. It's telling me it couldn't find a relationship between the two activities in the schedule. So that's yet another way to check on your logic, see if it's robust, and then see if there's a relationship between any two tasks in the project. Let's talk about reporting. And I want to spend some time on this because there's a number of different ways to report. In fact, basically everything that I've done as part of the tips and tricks to this point has been something that I can report on as well. Now, I'm not going to show you every single little report that I can run that's going to be able to produce output information, but I'm going to show you a few of them, and I'm going to go over some keys that we built in throughout the application. One is customization, and I'm going to show you that on one of our executive summary, executive briefing reports. Two, we're not precious about keeping the data within the Acumen suite. Data-oriented reports can be exported to Excel. The more visual-oriented reporting can be exported into PowerPoint. And then the verbal or AI-type reports can be exported either to a PDF or to a Word, a document. And I'll even talk about some of the further customization that can be done to use Fuse as the data engine to put information in exactly the reporting format that you're looking for. You don't have to take our word for it. You can actually take the Fuse information using our application programming interface and create, through different software packages, different reporting packages, the reports to the exact specification that you're trying to create. Okay, so like before, let's go back over to the Acumen suite. One commonality between many of these screens is on the right-hand corner, there's a Publish button. Now, depending on the screen, there's different options. The different screens produce different outputs. Let's start with forensics, because it really is one of my favorites, especially when it comes to output. If I go to the Publish button, I have two options. I can publish to Excel, or I can publish only the current tab to Excel. Well, I want to have everything. I won't, assuming these project schedules came from a subcontractor, I want to be able to take the entire forensics world here that I've created, put it into an Excel file, and send it back to them, because I've got some questions for them. I want to know why some things have changed, but rather than have to transpose that information, I can simply lump that all into an Excel file, but it's very elegant, and I'm going to show you exactly how that works right now. So we'll save that to an Excel file. And you can see here, I'm just looking at, it was the very first result that came up when we went into forensics. It's just the project level information. Each one of the buttons on the forensics screen is now an Excel sheet tab. And the results set, if you remember this calendar view even with those green shifts that were added on, that's on a tab called Work Weeks. And then each of those fields that have been added to the to this portion of the screen, including any ones that you add on your own, like that feature field that we talked about, those tabs will be here as well. So what you end up with is the entire Acumen Forensics environment in a single distributable Excel file that can be used and consumed by folks that you may have or subcontractors that don't have access to the Acumen software. Same holds true with this logic tab. All these different logic checks. I think this publish area looks the same. This lets us copy to the clipboard because of the graphic that we have here on the logic sensitivity. So that logic and forensics, they work very similar. Logic will take all these different logic checks that we have, and it'll make those sheet tabs in an Excel file. Okay, let's go to diagnostics. As I mentioned, my favorite screen. Let's drill in on initial plan. Let's unclick our trace. And okay, so here we are at our base view. This is typical of what we might see if we just entered into Fuse for the first time and loaded a single schedule. Here I have a few different publish options with even some options under the top level options. So there's a lot going on here, but it's really all for your benefit. Let's start with this executive briefing report. This is very powerful. I'm going to show it to you by default. This report is awesome because what it does is it takes the sophisticated Acumen view, the grid view, and it puts it into an executive briefing that's very easy to understand for someone who might not have the level of familiarity with scheduling as the average user of Fuse. So this might be appropriate for the program manager to give them the bottom line on what's happening with their schedule without them needing to understand what all the terminology means. Why? Because it's all explained in this report. Okay, that's great. We've got a canned report. Well, it's not a canned report. As I customize this view, either by selecting different metrics or let's drill this one down by control account manager, which is basically the responsible managers for the different tasks. So now I've got Jane, Jim, and Terry, and I can look at their performance on these quality metrics here. But what I can also do is I can publish that report again, either to Word or PDF. And it's commenting, and it's doing the same analysis as it did before at the project level, but it's doing it at the responsible management level. Jane Meyer's analysis, Jim Smith's analysis, Terry Jones's analysis. So the possibilities here are unlimited, because if your program is aggregated by WBS, location, responsible manager, or technology even, you can do a schedule analysis in English that an executive can understand without understanding the nuances of scheduling, and it can be grouped by however you configured your screen here. If you want to pick different metrics, and it's going to do the same thing. So if you wanted to do just a logic analysis with these three control account managers, you would go to the logic tab, group by manager, and then run the report. So not only is this your kind of analysis dashboard and analysis screen, it's also your report definition screen at the same time, because what you do here is impacting what this Word document is ultimately going to look like and how it's going to be organized. Okay, let's go back. The next one I wanted to talk about was, publishing. For the more technical folks, what you can do is you can take this view and you can create a more detailed analyst report. So let's do that. Rather than me talk about the report, let's run the report, see what it looks like. And this is another case of getting the information from Fuse as it's presented in Fuse into an Excel format so that it can be used by all. Here it is. Here's the same screen that we had up in Fuse, but we're in the Excel environment. And on the sheet tabs, I've got my ribbon view, I've got my ribbon analysis. I was organized by control account manager, so I have all my items available by CAM. It's arguably quicker in some respects in Fuse because it's presenting me the information in batch rather than me clicking on the different metric categories to see the results. We have some users that start with this report rather than starting interactively in the tool. If you're more interactive, I can look at the missing logic items here. If I want to see them in batch, I can go over and I can see them here, in this case, by control account manager. If I hadn't grouped by control account manager, this would show me all the missing logic items on the whole report, on the whole project. Here's Terry Jones. Here's that phase analysis by year. And then even the details by each year of the project. If my phases were quarters, or if I set them up as months, which I can do up here, I'd be looking at that information by month. So again, not only when you use this screen are you doing analysis, but you're defining the parameters for a new report at the same time. You'll find throughout, tomorrow when we talk about Acumen Risk, which has many different graphs and charts that come out of it, there's always, at a minimum, the copy to clipboard option as well. So when you're putting together that month-end PowerPoint presentation, there's no need to do any tricks or key presses to scrape the screen to get the information out. You always have the copy to clipboard button as well, so you can build that management briefing from right here in Fuse. Also, many of our customers find our dashboard very handy as well, and here's where we get into the reporting and the clipboard, where this can be copied as a graphic into a Word document, Excel document, or PowerPoint file, whatever tool that you're using in the Windows environment to get this information into your briefing. The dashboard itself introduces 14 ways to look at your information, including however you've configured your diagnostic screen can be incorporated as a widget into the dashboard screen as well. So as I've gone through, especially with the reporting, you see many of these interconnections between different areas of the application. We talked about how the diagnostic screen is helping you to define the dashboard. It's helping you to define the reports. We have a few different ways of tracing logic on the logic screen, on the diagnostic screen, and you can use those together. I like to think of it as we have the individual components, but the sum of those parts add up to something even more, because as you're working in one area of the application, you're actually doing things that will affect the behavior of other areas of the application as well. So let's see here. Let's do this. I think Jen has been looking at questions as we go, so I'm going to pull up my console here, And while we do that, I'll put our contact information up on the screen as well, so that you can, oh, see, now I've made a mess of things, but it has our website address. We have a software trial available. If you haven't used the software, we have a Twitter address, and we have, of course, our email address as well. So contact us. But Jen, if you're on the line, have any good questions come in that we might be able to address?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. And the first question I can actually answer is, has this webinar been recorded, and are we going to be sending out the slides? And the answer is yes. This is actually a 3-part webinar series. So today we covered Acumen Fuse. Tomorrow we're going to look at tips and tricks in Acumen Risk. And then the following day we're going to look at tips and tricks in Acumen 360. So once all 3 webinars have been completed, we're going to send a follow-up to everyone that has attended with recordings of each session along with the slides. So you'll be able to see not only this one, but the other 2 in case you missed those. So a couple of questions came in for you, Tom, during the forensic analysis section. And the first 2 just have to do kind of with setting up the view. First is, can you compare more than 2 projects in forensics? And then also, do they have to be from the same data source, or can you compare a Primavera project to a Microsoft project?
Oh, that's a really good question. And let's see, I'm going to actually pull in another snapshot here just to illustrate what it looks like when you do have more than 2 schedules to compare. Take just a second here. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I pulled it in not as a snapshot. Well, let me, while this catches up, let me answer the second part. The answer is yes. We're once, as part of the information being brought into Fuse, it normalizes the format regardless of what tool that you're using to bring the information in. I've worked on projects where subcontractors have switched between MS Project and Primavera and then back during the same project execution. So it was very valuable to me to be able to not have to worry about that, knowing that Fuse talked to both applications, and I could freely interchange and do analysis between the 2. The customer was very concerned about it. I told them, I said, it's very transparent to me. I'm able to look at it just the same. Maybe they were a little bit disappointed in that, but for me, it was definitely an advantage. And if I go to the right place here, like I have now, let me pull in another snapshot here so I can demonstrate what it looks like in forensics. And it should take just another second to do that. It looks like I dropped one of my snapshots. Jen, let's go to the next question, and I'll try to catch up with that one.
Okay, no worries. The second one is just, I guess, about scheduling practice. Is it a normal practice to allow negative lag?
To allow negative lag?
Right.
Ordinarily, no, and a lot of our clients don't use negative lag, and some will use negative lag, but the regulatory agency might prefer that they not use negative lag. So let me import these snapshots here, and we'll go look at that, and I'll show you how that can jump out at you right away if it's something that you're not supposed to do, but you think might have been done anyway in your project. We'll show how that can basically bubble up to the surface right away. So let me give it one more shot here to import these three projects. I haven't imported these 3 in combination before, so let's see. And MS Project's not happy about one of the things that I've done apparently to one of my projects. It's still not. I think I created a problem in one of my MS project files. What I'll do is I'll answer this lags question, and then if that's our last question, I'll hang on the line and I'll do it with some Primavera files that I know have better integrity than these. But let's talk about the leads or negative lag. By default, we have some tolerance for leads in our schedule quality metrics. In 2010, I have 5, and I can look at exactly what those items are that have leads on them. Here's where our customization comes into play, though. I can go to the leads metric, or negative lags, and I can adjust the colors and the thresholds for those colors to not allow any. In fact, I can make this a green-red situation. Don't delete the metric. Let's do this. Let's change the color of any of these conditions to red. Let's go back over to diagnostics. It's allowing 1 right now, but it now made my 5 leads into a red type situation. And we can make it so that this is red as well, so that you'll only get green if there's no leads. I realize that was a little more than the question called for, but I wanted to talk about what we could do if you're in a situation where you shouldn't have any leads at all and don't want to have any tolerance for it at all.
Another question for this for the diagnostics tab is, can Acumen trace out of sequence progress?
Out of sequence logic? I'm sorry, Jen, can you repeat the question?
Sorry, it says, can Acumen trace out of sequence progress?
Out of sequence progress, okay. We're on the logic tab. In this schedule, I happen to have no out of sequence logic, but this is exactly where you would do that. It would show if there were out of sequence items. It would show me a list. I'm sure I have open end, so I'll pull up that list. It would show me a list, much like this one, that showed the items that were statused out of sequence. And you can see, if you're not sure what that means, when you hover over the out of sequence button, it tells you exactly what it's checking for. And the little cheat that I use is I look at the picture and I look and see that there's that this top activity isn't complete, but then it relates to this bottom activity. Which is, and of course we have the explanation here as well when I hover over it.
The next question I can actually answer is asking if we're planning to do any webinars or tutorials relating to custom metrics, and the answer is actually yes. Our annual user summit is coming up on October the 1st and 2nd, and actually the day before the conference starts, we're having a full day of training workshops, which one of them includes writing custom metrics. So that will be the best place, I guess, to get some training on that. And then, Tom, another question around forensics is, can we compare activity ID changes?
I'm sorry, Jen, repeat the question. You broke up on me a little bit.
Can we compare activity ID changes?
ID?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And there's a configuration option for that. ID can be the key, or if something else is the key, the ID can be compared. For instance, if your unique key is unique ID, and then you want to see which IDs have changed, you can do that. Let me finally now I've gotten my multiple projects up on forensics. Let's go to remaining duration. And what it's doing is I have initial plan, 1 month update, current schedule, 1 year update. It's stacking those up, much like the trend analysis. It's stacking those up vertically, and it's showing me snapshot over snapshot how that value has changed. And again, I can do that for any one of these checks here. You can even have multiple projects. This is a project with several snapshots. You can have multiple projects, and it'll list them for me down here, and then I can pick which block I want to look at here in forensics as well. Forensics with ID changes, there's a fuse option under platforms where for MS projects you pick the activity comparison field, and that's what it's going to use as the basis for the comparison. So there won't be any, by default, by definition, there won't be any changes there. But if you're comparing by unique ID, then you could use ID as one of your comparison fields and see what the change might be.
Okay. I guess we have time for one more question, and it says, when comparing a Microsoft project schedule with a Primavera schedule, do the activity IDs have to be identical?
Yes, but you get the flexibility where I am now for the MS project side to choose what you'll be comparing as the basis of comparison to the Primavera ID. The bottom line there is the system needs something to hang on to. We can't take two dissimilar groups of information and try to show you what the differences are between the two. But we give you the flexibility on the Microsoft project side for you to define what that ID is going.
Welcome to GoToWebinar, web events made easy.
You want to be careful to bring that information over. And what's great about conversions, and I've helped folks do this, is you can use forensics to make sure that you've gotten a good conversion between scheduling tools. Okay. All right. Well, that's the time that we have. Thanks, everyone. Same time tomorrow for the Acumen risk tips and tricks. If you've used Fuse but not risk, that'd be a good one to see the risk capability. And for current risk users, we'll kind of go into some of the cool functionality that you might not have explored yet. So thanks, everyone, and have a great day.